Alrighty, here we are on a Wednesday. I want to tell you the tale today about a friend of mine for 25 years, two friends. We'll start with the first one. Willie Burlett was a friend of mine. We were friends. We worked together for 25 years. He had a sweet wife named Margie, two sons and a daughter. Willie, the two sons was always a Willie. Wherever Willie went, you could pretty well know that the two sons are going to be there. And there was Eric and Jerry Burlett and sweet Margie. She was a nice lady. Willie was an Eagle Scout master, and his sons were Eagle Scouts. And Margie was a woman involved in the scouting all of her life. So they're patriotic American people. Well, I had a Jeeping club that I ran with. I had a good buddy that had a CJ5 Jeep, CJ5, with a 351 Cleveland Ford engine with about 400 horsepower. It had the headers and the cam and all the carburation. And he was putting probably on the dyno at the wheels 400 horsepower. I had a CJ7 that had a really well built American Motors 304, and they're no slouch. You found a 304, you found them in the Javelin and some of the other hotter rigs. Well, Willie always wanted to go four-wheeling with us because he wanted to add to the adventure of his Eagle Scout stuff. And he kind of liked old Mac. He always liked to run of old Mac. And so we invited him out to go Jeeping. Now, our goal was to get to Silver Lake. If you look on Google Earth to Washington State, down by Mount Rainier, you'll find a town called Randall, Washington. And Randall is the jump-off place where we jump off and cross the Cowlitz River into a very big forested area. I mean, many thousands of acres, hundreds of thousands of acres of forested land. Well, we were going up there. I was taking them to the best lake in that area. Silver Lake was the most productive. You could catch rainbows, dolly, vardens, cutthroats. It was a well-stocked lake by the game department. And I had my two sons with me, two of my sons. And we were cruising along. Tim had, like I say, a really hot Jeep. Willie Burlett showed up in a four-wheel drive Dodge pickup truck, four-door, with four-wheel drive, a D200. That's 3/4 ton truck. And he wanted to go Jeeping with us, so we had to keep the Jeeping to a minimum, you know, where it wouldn't be too severe. And so we took him, of course, up to Silver Lake. On the way up there, the road had washed away, and we didn't know this. We come around the corner. Tim was leading the way. Tim was, there's always an aggressive, the alpha male. Tim was a U.S. Army Ranger a thin guy from New York. He was born and raised, he was a Jewish boy from New York City. And him and I was the best of friends. I was a Southern rebel rouser, and me and Tim, when we were out together, we changed the world. And so Tim was leading the way like he always did. And I was second behind Tim and following us with Margie and Willie and his two sons. And we got back there to where the river is washed out. Now, washed out rivers are not a big deal. You can always put them in four-wheel drive and cross the river. In this case, you couldn't because the channel was about 20 feet wide and it was about 60 feet down to the water. It's in the mountains now. I forgot to tell you, we're up in the Cascade Mountains, right there by Mount Rainier. And so we sized up the situation, and me being from the Dukes of Hazzard country, and I know how to handle Dukes of Hazzard missions, we got the shovels out, me and my boys and Tim, and we shoveled up 2 ramps. We put rocks down, plenty of rocks coming out of the hillside there, and we put rocks down. And then we covered them in dirt. Just 2 ramps now for each wheel. We didn't build a big ramp. And we built it right up to the crevices, where it went over the edge. And we figured it's only 20 feet across. So a 20-foot jump ain't much for a good Jeep. That's about 2 lengths of your vehicle, or not even quite 2 lengths. That ain't a big jump. But it's a treacherous jump because if you miscalculate, over to your right is several hundred feet that you would fall over the edge, and it wouldn't be good. So I got the ramp all. We drove up on the ramp. Now me and Tim, we had big tars, and so we packed down the dirt. We drove right up to the edge of the crest of the ramp to make sure our angle was right. We looked at it, the nose was at the right altitude. We said, hell yes, this is doable. So Tim said, I'll take the first jump. So Tim, he winds it up a little bit, boom, he jumped over and landed beautiful. I mean, he cleared it. I mean, it was a really nice jump. He had to calculate how much speed he was going to need, and he was able to do it just right. So I decided it'd be my time next, so I filled in a little bit more dirt where he had when he kind of accelerated, he left some tracks. And my tires is wider than Tim's because I got a bigger CJ7, and I'm heavier. So I calculated I'm going to need just a little bit more juice. I don't have the horsepower he's got. I had maybe 300, 325, something like that, maybe 300. I'm just saying 300 maybe. So I get up there and I make my jump. Me and my 2 boys. We jump over and landed really good. But I immediately kind of got off the side of the road, make way for Willie. Now Willie ain't never jumped in his life, but he took his shovel and he filled in the ruts I made going up on the ramp, because knowing that he's going to be heavier, he's going to dig in pretty good. So Willie lined himself up. Margie clenched her jaw. Eric and Jerry Burlett was sitting back here in that back seat. They put the thumbs up and it's go condition. Now them boys didn't lack no courage. Now don't don't tell, just because they've never done a jump before doesn't mean they don't have courage. But there was a little bit of anxiety. If they miscalculated, they could be killed. So Willie went to make the jump, but at the last second he throttled back. So the thing goes up the ramp, but it comes down nose first on the other side. He cleared the 20-foot span, but when he hit, it threw him onto the steering wheel, and that made him turn to the right. And when he back wheels hit, it pushed him over the edge, and he went over the edge. He cleared the ditch, but he went over the edge, and he was now high centered on the crest of the ridge, right where you're looking down 200 foot into this deep gorge. So the two boys jumped out of the back seat. Margie couldn't get out because her front seat was hanging over the cliff. The truck is high centered. The front wheels are off the ground. The back wheels are off the ground. And they're just balanced there. Willie is looking as white as a ghost. Margie is bit through her bottom lip. She had her jaws clenched so tight. So Willie could get out onto the ground just barely, but he had to drag Margie across the shifter and all that stuff and get her over there and drag her out the side door, out the driver's door. And the thing was sitting there like a teeter-totter, just hanging on. So I turned my Jeep around. I had a 12,000 pound Warren winch on mine, and we turned it facing up the hill, across the road, facing up the hill. And then we spooled out quite a bit of cable and went up to a tree. My boys ran up there and put a snatch block on the tree, opened up the snatch block, put the cable in, and came back to the rear bumper of Willie's D200 Dodge. And we got it anchored. We know it ain't gonna go nowhere. And so we pull Willie back up onto the road. We pulled him to where his back bumper was now against the cliff, the hillside, the cliff side. But his front end, the front wheels are back on terra firma. They're on the ground, but he can't do anything at this point. So Tim, he comes around, and Tim puts his winch on to the front end and pulls Willie around. He pulls Willie's front end around. So, man, we were happy as a pig in mud. We got in, everybody loaded up. A hard time to get Margie back in that D200. She was scared of, oh my God, that was the most frightening thing of her life. Well, we went on up heading up to Silver Lake. And we got up there, and the road to Silver Lake was washed out. We couldn't get over there. We couldn't cross over into the stream that fed Silver Lake. So we went to the top. We looked around. It was beautiful up there. But unfortunately, we couldn't go any further. So now we got to go back down. And we get there now. Margie is in a state of terror. So when we got back to the big ditch where the river had washed the road out, the creek, the decision was made for me to go back across first. So we had to shovel up a ramp, and we made a good ramp, and I jumped across. me and my boys. And so it was decided that Tim, my buddy Tim Shefflin, nice Jewish boy from New York, Tim would drive the D200 and Willie would drive the Jeep because it was a little bit less daunting, you know, it wasn't as scary. So, like I say, I jumped across, and here comes Willie. I'm sorry. Here comes Tim in Willie's D200 Dodge. No. Yeah. Tim came across in the D200 Dodge. And he did good. He landed really good. So now the hurdle is over. We're worried. Now all we got left over there is Willie. Willie is over there in the CJ5. And he shoveled some dirt in there because that D200 tore the ramp up pretty good. And hopped in the Jeep by himself now. Tim brought the two boys and Margie out when he jumped it with... when Tim jumped. Well, everybody trusted Tim. Tim is an Army Ranger, and he was kind of like a god when it comes to four-wheeling. He was the man. And now there is Willie in the CJ5, and he gets lined up, and he remembers how much power he used to jump across in his D200. And it wasn't quite enough of power, so he decided he was going to turn it up. And he did turn it up. Now let me tell you, I forgot to tell you, I think I mentioned, it had 400 rear wheel horsepower. When he tweaked that throttle on that CJ5 with the 400 horsepower 351 Cleveland engine, Willie came across the river with quite a bit of authority. I was standing there, I'm 6'1", and Willie came above my head, and I could see the undercarriage of the CJ5. He done sailed past the D200 Dodge sitting there, and Margie and the kids were all out on the side of the road watching their dad or their husband make the jump, and he's done did a Dukes of Hazzard moment right there. It was just a beautiful scene to see for me and Willie. Me and Tim Shefflin, we thought that was the greatest thing we ever seen in our life. My boys gave a standing ovation to Willie in Tim's CJ5. When that Jeep hit, it done took another leap. It done, see, Willie got that pedal to the metal. Oh man, I'm telling you, woo, what a landing. I just remember to this day when Tim come up the ramp, not Tim, Willie came up the ramp in Tim's CJ5. There was dirt and everything falling out from under the bottom of the CJ5. And my God, I tell you, what a landing. Well, we got home. Nobody was hurt. It was a great adventure. Willie talked about that for years, and I'm still talking about it 40 years later. Almost 50 years ago. But anyhow, now let's move on to Tim. I told you he's an American hero. He was a nice Jewish boy from New York. He did not know the meaning of fear. He was horribly wounded in Vietnam. They had stabbed him so many times. The U.S. Army got overrun by the NVA, North Vietnamese regular army. They overrun the U.S. Army. I think they were up towards the DMZ, but they got overrun. And Tim was stabbed in the chest, under his armpits. He was cut across the back. He was cut up pretty bad. They cut him bad. but he killed a lot of people on that day. He had no fear, and Tim came home with no parades or nothing. But his badge of honor was bayonet scars on his chest and his body, on his back and his arms. They cut him up good and shot him. But I think he's gone now. I think he left us a few years back. But one time we were up in Washington State. There's a famous Jeep climb called the Natchez Trail. Now let me tell you a little about the Natchez Trail. In the 1800s, I'm saying around 1850, there was two wagon parties, wagon trains, and they met over in Utah. One of them was German immigrants, European immigrants. They were known as the Meeker Party. Meeker, Ezra Meeker. You can look him up in the encyclopedia. He's an American pioneer, Ezra Meeker. He settled in Kent Valley. And Ezra Meeker met up with this other wagon master. They knew each other. They've crossed the country before. And everybody agreed they was going to go and hit the Oregon Trail. Well, somebody had told this other party there was a better, easier route to San Francisco, and it was across the Sierra Nevadas. And if you just follow this road, you're going to be before you know it, in the Sacramento Valley. The name of that party was called the Donner Party. As you know, the Donner Party, it didn't end very well. But the Meeker Party was a success story, and they pioneered all of the Northwest. Well, we had crossed over the Natchez Trail over to Yakima, and we was parked over on what's called the west side of the Natchez. Our trailers, I pulled a self-contained trailer up there. And we'd crossed it successfully. Now we got all hooked up. I had a K5 Blazer, Chevrolet Blazer. I couldn't take the Blazer across the Natchez because the Blazer is too wide. And so we was pulling the trailer out from the western side of the Natchez Trail and through the Federation Forest and stuff, and we was coming down towards Greenwater, a town called Greenwater, Washington. And my buddy Tim had what's called KC daylighters in his grill on his CJ5 Jeep, and he had hit a couple of trees and some stuff, and he bent his little push bar in the front a little bit, and he pulled up where I could see him in my rear view mirror in that K5 Blazer, and he said, my trail lights are they good? You know, these are KC daylighters, you know, for off-road. And I told him to look pretty straight to me, and so he told me, he said, hey, I've got to be in Puyallup. That's where he lived. I've got a Texas Hold'em game. He's a gambler. He was a professional gambler. And he said, I'll see you later on. You guys have a safe trip out of the mountains. Well, he started to blow by me like I was sitting still. But when he got past my trailer and his front end was right where my rear bumper was, all of a sudden his Jeep made a left-hand turn, went up the hill and rolled over 3 times, side rollover, caught his front bumper and did 2 endos. On his second endo, he was thrown out the back. He was laying up on the side of the hill. His body was crumbled up. He had a foot behind his head. It wasn't pretty. I'm not laughing at it, but it was a cartoonish looking view, if you will. Imagine a guy laying there with his foot behind his head. So me and my boys got out. We got him stretched out. He was unconscious and he was bleeding really, really bad. And so we got old Tim laid out there, so we could stretch him out, check him out. So he began to come around, and we had tourniquets on him. I had a thumb in one of the holes. He had a hole in his side of his head there, and I had my thumb in it because it was squirting blood out. And one of my boys was holding another puncher that he had. He had glass in him. They pulled the big old chunk of glass out of him. And Tim started coming around, and he said he was hurting really, really bad. And I looked at him, and he was bleeding a lot. So we're thinking he was pretty well near the end. I was thinking he was, because he's starting to gray out on us. And he said, could you make me a drink? And I said, you think you should have alcohol with this much blood loss? He said, just make me a drink and I'll deal with it. So I made him a real strong rum and coke. And he drank it down in like 2 gulps. And he laid there moaning a little bit and everything. And so we unhooked the trailer from the K5 Blazer, and we loaded him in the back seat. And we took him down to Greenwater, and the town of Greenwater, and they called the highway patrol. They called an ambulance, but the ambulance sent a highway patrol first, and because the ambulance was 45 miles away. So the highway patrol got there, and after he went in and checked Tim laying there in the back seat of the Blazer, he came out and he said, how much did that boy had to drink? And it's like 9 o'clock in the morning. I said, hey, he hasn't had anything to drink. He said, don't lie to me, boy, I can smell it on his breath. He's just reeking of alcohol. And so Tim told him, he said, I asked for the drink because if I was going to leave here, I wanted to go out and not in pain. And then the highway patrolman said, you know, if he dies, you'll be charged with manslaughter. I go, hey, the powers to be, you might argue with the law. So they take him down to Enumclaw, and they put him in the hospital in critical condition. Broken ribs, broken collarbone, broken arm. They thought he'd been in a bad accident with all them scars all over his body where the Vietnamese had stabbed him with a bayonet. But so I go home. We get home and get everything, from the camping trip, and I got to go to work. Well, about 11 o'clock that night, the phone rings. And it's my buddy Tim. And he said, hey, you got to come get me out of the hospital. I go, no, man, you really need to be in there. You lost a lot of blood. He said, I don't have any insurance. And he said, I said, no, man, I can't do that. So he said, let me talk to Virginia. That was my third wife. So I let him talk to Virginia. And so after a while, she said, I'm going to go get him. So she drove over there, and the hospital in Enumclaw was a 1-story hospital, like a ranch-style house. And he told her, you come along the side over there. He told her where to park. And she watched him crawl out the window. He unplugged himself. He unplugged all that stuff, and he was on his hands and knees, and he crawled on his hands and knees and got over there and got in her car. and she took him down to Enumclaw, down to Puyallup, Washington, where he lived. And well, when he was laying down there, he can't hardly move. He's now so sore. That morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, he called me. He said, "Man, you got to get down here." He said he lived right next to the Puyallup River, and next to that was a big open field of hundreds of acres of open field, like a grain field. And the big the big gophers, the river rats, the wharf rats, they'd come from around the riverbank and got over in the grain field, and they had ate holes through the back of his house. And now he's laying there paralyzed. I mean, so sore he can't move, with broken ribs and collarbone and arm and stuff. And these rats are running across the end of his bed. They're huge. They were looking for food in the house. And so he said, "You got to come and help me." So I went out in the garage, and I took a 2x4 and a piece of sheet metal and anchored the sheet metal to the 2x4. And I put on one end, I grounded me a stud, and I took a 110 volt cord, split it, and I put one leg to the metal plate, and the other leg I made two plastic insulators, and I strung out a piece of wire 6 inches above, copper wire above the metal plate, 5 inches or so, because these are big wharf rats now. Look at this. Look at here. Wow. Well, got a roundabout. Anyhow, I took it down there, set it up. I had just barely got back home. He told me, he said, "Man, you got to get down here. I got burning rats. They're actually on fire." He said when they'd reach up there and get the cheese on that wire, it would electrocute them, and the 20-amp breaker that this is connected to was not enough. The rat's body didn't pull enough of current to trip the breaker. And he said, "Man, you got to get down here." I go down there, and he had 3 rats on the line, and the feet were burned off, and the fur was smoking on their bodies. And anyhow, we go in there, and in the bathroom, he had a ground fault plug-in. We changed out the ground fault. We took it off from the bathroom and put it down there. We put it down there where we had it up, so that the rats, when they would bite into it, it would trip the breaker. Oh, buddy, old Tim. Old Tim was a tough dude. Oh, what's the name of the place? Mexican restaurant. Let me see if my woman want to do Mexican. So anyhow, there's my story for the day of Tim Burlett, Willie Burlett and Tim Shefflin. Both in their own ways American heroes. Hey, wave it. There we go. Yeah. God bless you. Thank you for listening to me. And Angelique and I, we're going to go do Mexican restaurant. Bye-bye. Yes.